Oh, hey! Well, look who it is! Welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute, hasn't it? Alright, well, let's get you guys caught up since it's been a few days. Right now we're in 116 Steering and Suspension, and you are with Mr. H on A-Level Tech. So, what we have next is we're just about finished up our Neon Engine series. Now we're going to go and dive more into steering and suspension as well as brakes. Now, what's coming up is most of you are going to be broken up into groups once again. If you don't have groups already, well, I'm going to put you in a group. But what's going to happen is throughout the next week, you guys are going to become specialists in not only mounting and balancing tires, because that is technically a part of suspension. So, little segue, little mini powwow on tires. Tires are considered a part of steering and suspension because, well, they do steer, and they also are the main cushion from road force before it gets to the suspension of the car. So if you've ever watched a car go over a speed bump or anything like that, you actually do see the tire flex because that is filled with air, pressurized air, and that does cushion, not completely, but that does cushion a lot of the bumps on the road so you don't feel every single pebble you run over. So the tire is the first line of defense when it comes to steering and suspension. So tires are also involved in that. So there's machines back here that I'm having everyone trained on. Like I said, I am deputizing a few of you for certain areas so you can show your expertise to your classmates and hopefully get a little more out of the learning process, because the best way to learn as much as you can is also to teach. It shows you things you don't know. It shows you, let's say, a little more in-depth perception of how a machine works when you're actually instructing somebody on how to do it. So we're going to experiment with that. Now, we have the tire machines, we have the tire balancers. We also today are going to learn how to plug a tire. Yesterday we learned how to patch a tire with a patch plug, but we're also going to learn how to plug a tire as well. Now, we're not using this until next year. This is Mr. C's job, but since I'm right here, I was looking at, well, how does this machine actually work? It's all computer based, it's all sensors. It's all cameras. How does it know what to do? I'm glad you asked. Okay, so the purpose of this video is just a little bit of an introduction into what you guys are doing. It's not showing you guys how to use the machines, because that's what the manuals are for, and that's what your classmates are for when I deputize them for certain areas. But I will go over certain things with steering and suspension. So, just to bring us all back, a little bit of a review from 106. We have unibodies and body-on-frames. We have frame rails. We have an actual car that is just one giant frame itself. We have rack and pinion, which is, for the most part, less complicated, less weight, and fit in just about anywhere because it's more compact of a unit. You're going to see that on just about all sedans, if not all of them that are out on the road today. So that's an actual steering rack where you have the inner and tie rods, inner and outer, pulling in and out against each other on the steering knuckle. Now, we also have a gear assembly or steering gear assembly, which would also be counted as parallelogram steering, where I would have a main steering gear attached to the frame. Most of the time it's going to be on the driver's side frame rail, and that actually has a center link that then connects to different components such as an idler arm, the inner and outer tie rods, and all of that makes a lot of weight. It makes up for a lot of weight. A steering gear can easily weigh just about the same, if not more, than a rack and pinion itself, not counting everything else with the center links and the inner and outer tie rods and idler arm that goes along with that. So those are things that you guys should pretty much know, should be pretty much reviewed. The S10, obviously that is a steering gear, but if you were to go over to, let's say, the Mercedes or the Audi over there, they would have rack and pinions. I have people still rebuilding steering gear boxes. Those are manual boxes. A lot of these vehicles you're going to see have power steering, which means it aids in the ability to steer at low RPM or when the vehicle is almost at a standstill. So, just add into the mix when we're talking about power steering, which most of these vehicles are going to have. Not many vehicles have manual steering unless you're going way back when. Power steering is to help you steer the car without having to put so much muscle into it when the car is going very slowly or at a dead stop. Once the car starts moving along, it doesn't need that much pressure to help you steer back and forth. It will assist, but most of the assist is happening when the car is stationary. Now, let's talk a little bit about alignment angles, since you guys are also in the beginning basis of alignments. Once again, this is not going to be a video on how to actually use these tools, but just sort of a, hey, we're back, we're in 116, what can you expect? What should you get out of this? What is the course competencies? What should you walk away with once you are done with this course? Well, for starters, this is getting annoying, so I'm taking that off. You're going to use different things, such as a toe bar or a toe out bar, to measure toe. So since we're talking about toe, let's do a little bit of background. Toe, if I was standing straight and I'm looking at my feet, so let's say my feet, let's pretend I'm the front of the car. Toe is, if I was driving, when I turn the wheel, this is toe. So straight, left, right, that's toe. Toe is the #1 cause of wear on tires. That's why we recommend rotating tires, just because the front tires scrub a lot and they're doing the most movement back and forth. To minimize wear, that's why we rotate the tires from front to back in all the different ways. Now, what happens when the toe is off? Well, when the toe is off, we actually can wear the outside edges of the tire. It's called feathering. So if you've ever seen a car with feathering, what you'll see is there's sort of like a little bit of a divot on the outside edge of the tread, whether it's on the inside of the tire or the outside of the tire, but you can feel that. And that'll happen when you, say, have a customer that does not rotate their tires and just leaves them in the same spot. It will feather. So that's a name of a type of wear, so feathering. There's a couple of different types of wear we can talk about. We can talk about camber wear, or if a tire gets lumpy, or if it's getting choppy. Choppy and feathering are very close to each other, but feathering is most of the time, you're not going to be able to just see it per se, but if you were to run your hand along the sidewall on the top of the tread, right on the corners, you should feel just a little bit of a divot, almost like a bird's feathers, how they just kind of flake off. So feathering. So that's the main wear for toe. So toe, there is a spec. Usually you're going to want overall toe to be 1/8 of an inch. So most cars of today, it's not going to be 0. You don't want the toe to be straight 0. Usually you're going to want a positive 1/16 toe out on each tire to make a total of 1/8. That's what we do with most of our vehicles, is the 1/16 of toe for each tire. So slightly toed out. Depends on what type of style the car is and where the tie rods are located. But most part, that's what we do for alignment purposes. Now, the other two angles, camber and caster. Caster, we're not going to see much of any wear. It's a non-wear angle, at least for this year. Next year, we'll go into how it can be a tire wearing angle. But for this year, caster is a non-tire wearing angle. Camber, however, you guys should be familiar with. That is the tilt of the tire from the top to the bottom. So if we are a camber kid, or we like negative camber is when on the top of the tire, you see the tires tilting inward. That's negative camber. Positive camber is when they're tilting outward. Now, tools you'll be using is not this guy, because this guy does everything for you. I could train anybody in about maybe half an hour to an hour on how to use this machine and not know anything about alignment angles whatsoever, because it'll walk you through everything. That's not the point of the course. We're not just trying to walk you through. We're trying to get you to understand what happened before this machine and how this machine actually works and what benefit does it have. Because you can have a customer come in and you set the car and you line up all the heads, and guess what? The customer's complaining about a pulling condition, or the car likes to lead left or right. Steering wheel straight, but it likes to pull off the road. And you set the aligner up and everything is green. Now what? Yeah, I know how to use this aligner, and everything's green. Must mean there's not a problem. Not true, because green doesn't always mean good. We got to talk about road crown. We got to talk about the difference between camber and caster and what the specs should be, because green, there's actually a big, sort of like a big space between what's unacceptable on either side. So green, you do have a lot of leeway when it comes to green. Just because it's in the green doesn't mean it's going to go straight down the road. Now, the old school tools, we're talking about using the tow bar, the turntables. The turntables that you'll see are going to be measured in degrees, but not only that, you're going to also be using these guys. Now, this is old school, but let's say besides tow, which is tires going left or right, talking about camber and caster. So we have tools like these that work well on steel wheels, but what you're going to be using these for, and it's very easy to use. There's a thick manual on this that looks very confusing, but literally, if you follow the directions, it's 6 steps on how to set this up. So don't be intimidated by this. But what you're doing is you're measuring caster and camber based on degrees. So just like on this machine, when it says to do a caster sweep, going 10 degrees one way and 10 degrees the other, very similar for what you're doing on the turntables. You're doing the same thing. So you're zeroing this out and you're trying to figure out what the camber is and what the caster is. Camber is pretty easy. As long as you have the wheel straight ahead, and that is true straight, camber is just wherever the bubble's at, because all it is just the level up and down. Caster, you have to figure out by actually turning the wheels left or right, because caster, in this case, caster is the invisible line between where the steering knuckle is from the upper to the lower ball joint, or from the lower ball joint, if it's a McPherson strut, the whole way to the strut tower. It's that lean. So when you're looking at the vehicle from the side, most vehicles, if not all, are going to lean back with positive caster. And when those wheels turn, they actually turn like this with a slight tilt back and forth. They don't tilt perfectly like this, and they don't lean forward like this. They actually tilt back on their axis. So there's that invisible line. Now, when a vehicle, let's say the vehicle gets in an accident, front end collision, all of a sudden that caster gets messed up. The strut tower gets pushed back. Now it's negative caster. Bring it in. You see red for the caster. With a vehicle like that, maybe there's nothing you can do. You just have to tell the customer, hey, it's going to pull no matter what. Why does caster make the vehicle pull? Why does camber make the vehicle pull? What's the difference between the two? Should they both be the same? What are the specs for the vehicle? Those are questions you're going to ask in 116. When you come away out of 116 and go into 156, which is brakes, you should walk away with an understanding of all the different types of suspension, whether it's independent suspension, dead axle, a live axle, solid axles, long arm, short arm setups, McPherson strut, modified McPherson strut, multi-link suspension, kingpin suspension, all the different types that are set up on all these vehicles that we may have in the shop, all the spring styles. So if we have a coil spring, if we have a coil over, do we have a torsion bar, do we have leaf springs? There's plenty of types of springs we need to identify, as well as understanding the numbers on a tire. What is a tire made out of? Where did we come from with tires? So should I use bias ply or should I use single ply tires? Things like that. We should also walk away with the understanding of toe, camber, and caster. Wow. Toe, camber, and caster. So we should understand those angles. Not in depth, but to understand what those angles are. So this is not just a machine that I actually use and just hook up these sensors and just say, oh, yes, yes, okay, tie rod, camber, green, yes, yes, good. No, I understand that. Oh, okay, well, that's a 7/16 out, so I got to bring that out. Okay, but with road crown, that means that camber has to come in, so I know the vehicle is going to pull with the least amount of caster, the most amount of positive camber, so that means I got to change the camber from this side, even though it's green, to match this camber on this side, while giving this the most caster with this type of A-arm or control arm using shims or eccentrics or slider styles. So yeah, I was like, what did he just say? You're just understanding the angles for 116. The rest will come next year when you go into actually using this guy and being able to put that knowledge into work, because Mr. C will build off that knowledge. Now, that's all I have for today. You're with Mr. H on A-Level Tech. I'll see you later.